So hello, today I'm at St Mary the Virgin Church in High Easter in Essex, and I'd like to talk to you about the history of the church and the village itself. So High Easter is a village in Essex. It's 7 miles from Chelmsford City. High Easter is part of the Easters and an area adjacent to the Rodings. The population is around 800 and the elevation is 75 metres above sea level. Now the name High Easter refers not to the Christian festival but the 11th century Easter. In Old English, Easter meant sheepfold, so the village was simply known as High Sheepfold. Now in 1066, under the Saxon Esger, the constable was the fane here, and we also know that it was a large community of around 119 households, and this would include 13 slaves. Now to own a slave would show great wealth. Also in 1066 we had 60 pigs, 60 sheep and 30 goats and 10 beehives. Now in nearby Pleshy, many beehives were also owned. Between here and Pleshy, it's the most I've come across during the Saxon and Norman periods. Now during the Norman occupation, Geoffrey de Mandeville becomes not only the tenant-in-chief but also the lord of the manor here. Now going back to Esber the constable, his official title would have been the Staller. He served Edward the Confessor and Harold Godwinson, King Harold of Hastings. His family were in fact Danish Vikings of origin, and he saw battle at Hastings. Badly injured, he led the defence of London. Esger was in fact one of the wealthiest Saxon nobles of the time. We can go back further when the manor here and the lands belonged to Ely Abbey. The manor house is today known as High Eastbury. Today the house dates to the 13th century. Now we know that the Normans built a church here in the 11th century, making it early Norman. Most likely it replaced an earlier Saxon church. Now St Mary's today has a great deal of Roman brick within the chancel coins. It's also most likely that the Normans demolished a Roman villa in this area. We shall look at the bricks later. Now talking about the Mandevilles, they were to become Earls of Essex until 1189, and the manor and the lands passing on to the de Bohun family in the Duchy of Lancaster. Now it would be Charles I who would sell the manor to the City of London. So it's got a very interesting history. Now currently we're standing under a tree because it's raining, believe it or not, which is fantastic. No, video.
Oh. Well, listen, just tag me now.
Okay. Enjoy your day.
Sorry?
Enjoy your day.
Take care.
So now I've taken shelter under this, I believe it's a plane tree. It's an interesting family come into view during the Tudor period, the Gates family. William Gates brought Garnet's Manor House here in High Easter, and the family would live here, or live there, until 1582. Now William's son was Geoffrey, and he would become Sheriff of Essex, and was present at the siege of Tournai in France with Henry VIII in 1513. Now after the city surrendered, Geoffrey would become Sir Gates of High Easter. Now Geoffrey himself would have a son called John, who was born at Garnet's Manor House, and John would be educated as a lawyer, and he would become the groom of the Privy Chamber of Henry VIII. Now by 1536 he was in charge of keeping the peace in Essex, and he would go on to contribute 6 of his men to the royal army. Now King Henry trusted him greatly, and during the dissolution of the monasteries, John was in charge of removing the altars and despoiling the interiors of churches and monasteries. Now by 1537 he was promoted yet again to Page of the Wardrobe, and it does not sound so grand, but in reality it was the inner circle. His duties were to inspect the king's weapons, coats and gowns, of the Great Wardrobe, in fact of the Tower of London. He even took ownership of Thomas Cromwell's clothing after his execution. Now Sir John Gates rode on a horse next to King Henry at his own funeral. During the reign of Edward VI, he became, like his father, Sheriff of Essex and Knight of the Bath. Now under Queen Mary, he sent cavalry to prevent her from escaping from Malden. Queen Mary would not forget, and Sir John Gates would support Lady Jane Grey. This would set his fate, and in 1553, with his friend the Duke of Northumberland, John Pudley, they would both meet the executioner's block, and the Crown would seize all the property here. But we shall see the magnificent roof beams in the church, and they were paid for by the Gates, and they survived them all. Should we have a look at one of these community libraries? So it's the old British Telecom's phone box, which is now turned into High Easter's library. Now if you examine the names of the homesteads of this area, once fortified homes complete with moats: Maiden's Tyre, Lower House, Crippings, Hayrons, Stagden Cross, Cromps, Harpers, great garnets. You can almost imagine the names from the past coming alive. Most fascinating. Could this be indeed one of those old moats? The history moves forward in High Easter, but many buildings here survive from an earlier time. The once Cock and Ball Inn, for example, which we look at in front of us, dates from an earlier period, 14th century and 16th century, and now is a private residence. This was a typical agricultural village for centuries, even millennium. Between the 18th and 19th centuries, there were 5 grocers and drapers' shops here, 4 shoemakers, 3 tailors, 4 dressmakers. We even had a carpenter's, a bricklayers and a miller. In 1817, education arrived here. The first Sunday school started at St Mary's Church, serving 100 children. By 1846, the school had been moved behind the Cock and Ball, which I believe is here. And in 1893, a purpose-built Victorian school, today is a private dwelling. There was a windmill here, which ceased in 1906, and in the 1930s, Mains Water arrived here. The 1970s brought street lighting, so it's not so long ago. And in the 1980s, a new village hall. In 1999, we got a new post office, and the old Cock and Ball would finally close. Perhaps one in the future it will reopen. Now if we look today, we've got this most ancient building, the Punch Bowl, which is the central pub here. Now let us move on to this magnificent church from a time long ago. St Mary stands dead centre to the village. The walls are flint rubble, no doubt from the fields here, and there's Roman brick in herringbone layout in the chancel, which we'll look at later. The dressings are of Reigate stone from Kent, at great expense and clunch, so common to our Essex churches. So I've taken shelter under another tree, but we'll start with the west tower. It's 15 foot square and it's 15th century. It's built in 3 stages, and hopefully we'll have a closer look after it stopped raining. It's got a moulded plinth of checkerwork flint at the base, which I guess is from the 100 Years' War period. And above there's gargoyles and beasts that look down upon us. The west doorway has squandrels carved with horsemen and woodmen, along with winged beast and angel holding a shield. Again, we'll have a look later. But let's just see if we can zoom up onto the gargoyle sitting there right at the top. Now we shall enter the south porch, which is 16th century, built in brick. It's got a stepped gable and embattled parapet. So we'll open these old iron gates, and then we've got a oak bird screen, which keep closed. So when you look at the wall, you can see the plaster, the lime coming off, which is quite common. And you've got the 16th century brickwork. I did find here one of the pieces of glass from a previous window. Now if you look at the doorway, that's actually 11th century or 1100. And if you look here, it's got the original it's got the original mass or scratch dial before there was even a porch here. So there'd be a piece of wood there, and it would cast a shadow for the times of mass. So this door is 15th century, so again it's from the 100 Years' War, the Peasants' Revolt, and incredibly original. Now if you look at these iron strap hinges, these symbols actually are from that period where keep away evil spirits, and you'll find that on most hinges, crosses perhaps. Sometimes they'll put them on the iron bolts. So let's go inside. So we should now close this old door. Just love that clunk. We just have a closer look at the old door itself. So we just entered the nave, and to just pan around so you can see, there's a visitor's book as you enter. There's the various hymn and prayer books. We've got the font in front, and then we've got an array of pews. Looking in the distance, we've got the chancellor. So now we're looking down the nave, and it measures 58 feet by 28 feet. It's got a very early Norman south wall, and if you look above the door, you can see the arches. Now we've got a very unusual early Norman font, and I've never seen one quite like this before, and we should look at each face to see what they mean. So if we start with the east face, this represents St. Mark. If we go onto the northeast face, this is an angel holding a shield. And if you look, the face has obviously been damaged. But again, that may be where they've taken some parts of the stone in belief that it's a cure for ailments. This is an ox. This represents St. Luke. So on the northwest face, we have angel holding a shield. If I slide along the pew, this is west, this is a winged man, this is St. Matthew. Slide along the pew again. We have southwest, this is an angel holding a shield. So now we're on the south. This is a badly damaged one. This is an eagle of St. John. And we'll go around to southeast. We've got another angel holding a shield. Graffiti is most interesting from so many centuries. Now, if you look on the top, there's also a lot of graffiti in the leadwork. And this will be a full immersion. Wrong one. There. So we're now going to look at the West Tower. So we're now going to look at the actual turret or stairwell to the, or stair door to the tower. I like this sign behind, if you look at the original sign. By order of the Parochial Church Council, 1939, so right at the beginning of World War II. If you look in the middle, so this is a sanctuary handle. Originally there would have been a ring on there. If this was on the outside of the church, you could have held on to that and claimed sanctuary into the church itself for safety. And more graffiti here. I just want to show you this graffiti over here, which looks to me like Elizabethan. So if you see, there's a lady with a headdress. If we go down, now we're under the West Tower itself, and this is the old west doorway. If we pan up, we can see church window, west window. So at the base of the ladder, they've actually brought in for safekeeping a really old-looking wooden headstone. Above that, you've got this display which talks about when the roof was renovated, and it shows you some pictures. Now we're looking at the nave roof, and this was built around 1500. It's paid for by Sir Geoffrey Gate, who's captain of the Isle of Wight and Marshal of Calais. His family, Gate, has got his motto carved above. The massive tie beams are carved with animals and foliage. We've got elaborate wall plates, also carved, to support the immense weight. This is Tudor craftsmanship at its finest. It's most likely carpenters were contracted from palaces and royal buildings. So now we're looking at an incredibly old oak plank chest. It's got ornamental edging, most likely 14th century, and it's got 3 locks and keys, well it did have, one for the church, 2 for the churchwardens, 1 for the priest. It's most likely that it would have witnessed the 100 Years' War and the Peasants' Revolt. Now here's a really unusual item, and I've got no idea what it is. It's a vessel of some sort for pouring liquid. You've got 2 funnels, one either end. No idea. So now we've moved over to the north aisle, which is 11 feet wide. It's a 14th century extension, and you've got the original doorway there for the priest, slightly for the gentry. If we pan around, we've got a beautiful window. The colours. There's a further window if we pan around. Now this is Samuel and Eli Timothy, Lewis and Ennis, I think it is. Now, one other thing I've noticed is that the columns and the blockwork seem to have a blue tinge to it. So it's unusual. You'll see more of that later. So as you approach the eastern end of the aisle, you walk across these lovely iron grilles, which I guess are Victorian. Now we've moved towards the eastern end of the aisle, and you've got a lovely screen there. If I pan around, you've got another lovely window. You know, I'm a bit of soft touch for windows. Now this is St Edmund and St George. So you can see St Edmund holding the arrows. Now he was tested on his faith to Christ with arrows shot by the Vikings. And I believe they were so impressed they converted to Christianity. So I've just panned around from the aisle, and I'm now looking at the south wall of the nave, and you can see an extension there that's taken place in the 16th century, giving the building some more light and more height. And on the outside you can see the lovely brickwork. So now I've gone about as far as I can go in this aisle, and this is looking back towards the west side, and you've got this lovely screen. I guess this at once time would have been a chapel of some sort. And you can actually see how over the centuries sections have been carved in or spliced in. So we've also got some memorials. We've got the First World War, or European War, and on the floor we've got a roll of honour, which is quite unusual. Somebody's gone to a great amount of work on this. It gives the duty performed and the victory achieved. And if you look at each one, it gives the unit. Field Artillery, Essex Yeomanry, Suffolk, Essex, so on, Middlesex. So we've just left the north aisle and come over to the chancel. So you can see the pulpit in the corner there. So now we're facing the actual chancel itself. So the chancel itself is 26 by 22 feet, and it's 12th century. It's an incredible age. This part of the building has seen alterations through the 13th, 14th, 15th and 16th centuries. You can see the windows at the top to let more light in. If you look in the corners, you can see where the roof's been supported, I guess. Now, if you look in the centre, there's a very small piece of glass. I guess comes from the Mandeville family. This is on the south wall. Now, also on the south wall, we've got another ancient piece of glass. And I believe this has got French, as part of the French family. I'm not sure if it's Henry V or connection to Henry VII, I'm guessing, but that's quite old. So now we've entered the chancel itself. In 1865, St Mary's Church was renovated and altered by the Victorians. The vestry was added, which is in the corner. So we just have a look around at what we've got in here. So we've got this magnificent organ, pipe organ. So now we're in the chancel at the high altar end. We've got a fairly plain altar itself and the altar rails, which possibly made by somebody local to the village, made in Ireland. So if we pan around, we've got the vestry that was added. We'll take a closer look at the door. Now we're at the east window, and this is quite an unusual window actually. It's quite plain, but it's different style. Still got vibrant colours, and it's got the scene, the Star of David and Jesus' birth. That's great. And also in the chancel, we've got a lovely old window in the corner. And I guess the original priest door there. And if we pan around, we've got another lovely window there. Now also, if you look back, you can see there was an opening at one time. So we just finish off in here by looking at this lovely roof that was built in 1500, paid for by Sir Geoffrey Gate. This has got to be one of the finest in Essex, surely. So now the weather's been kind to us and the sun's coming out. So we'll have a look around at the church itself. So you can see this checkerboard flint. You can see the old stonework there, probably old headstones from the past. Just give you a scale with the buttresses of this tower. And we can look at the old weathered stonework. Door jambs, you can see it's just deteriorated. Look at that. And you can see there a very ancient carving, it's just weathered. You see the Tudor rose. There's another Tudor rose above the doorway. Looks like there's a lion. Now, the bells that are in the tower, we can tell you that we've got Robert Mott of 1590. The oldest bell foundry in the world was established by Robert Mott. 20 years before this bell was cast, Robert moved to the Whitechapel foundry in the Three Bells Inn in 1570. 2 bells from this period are in Westminster Abbey and are still rung, and they were last rung for Queen Elizabeth's Platinum Jubilee. And here we can see what's most likely to be the brickwork from Roman Villa. It's a huge amount of it. And if you look here, you can see the herringbone style. Again, if we go to the east side, and again, lots of Roman brick. And this is the vestry. Which traditionally is the meeting room for the church. And you can see the Victorians have basically worked on this. beast up. If we can make that out. So here's the old north doorway to nave, yes. No, north aisle. Trying to work that out. And here we have a lovely yew tree. So today St Mary the Virgin Church in High Easter carries out baptisms, weddings and funerals, and is very active in the community. So I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you very much.